Yes, the meeting is live now.
Thank you, Rajni. Next is item 15, approval of all those closed session meeting decisions. There will be around 8 of them. The first one, we have a motion here regarding the transition agreement. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Ainsley, and I need a seconder. By Carrie. All in favor? Yes, carried. The second resolution will be on service delivery agreement. Again, I need a mover.
Happy to move. It's Linda.
Linda, moved by Linda. Seconded by
Paul.
Paul. Thank you. All in favor? Yeah, it's carried. The next resolution on which agreement? Again, I need a mover and a seconder.
So moved, Carrie.
Moved by Carrie. Seconded by Brenda. All in favor? Carried. Next resolution is on financial arrangement. Again, I need a mover.
Moved by Paul.
Moved by Councillor Paul, and seconded by? Yeah.
Happy to second, Linda.
Brenda. Yeah, Brenda. All in favor? Carried. Next resolution, Commerce.
Moved by
Again,
Warren.
Moved by Warren and seconded by Brenda. All in favor? Carried. The next one is on transition team contract extensions. Moved by
So moved, Carrie.
Yeah, Carrie, and seconded by Linda. All in favor? Carried. The next one is legal services contract extension. Moved by Linda and seconded by Warren.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. The last one, on insurance. Moved by, need a mover?
Warren.
Warren, and seconded by Linda. All in favor? Carried. Okay, let's move to the item 16. That's the transition lead report. Michael.
Thank you, Lawrence, and I'll just be brief, and then Tom, I think, will want to say a few words as well. Just a moment to reflect that what you have just done in those approvals really is the culmination of all of our work together after the last year. And I just want to say thank you to the board for the amount of work that you have done over the past year in reviewing plans, proposals, and then getting to final agreements that will enable this transition to move forward successfully on June 1st. So just a huge thank you, and thanks to the team, our partners at Toronto Community Housing and the city for both the volume and the quality of the work, which I think will set a tremendously strong foundation for the new corporation. Our focus over the next couple of weeks will be two things, really. One is the finalization and the signing of these agreements as approved by the board, working with Tom as he takes on the leadership now of the corporation as of Monday, and supporting him through the work of the transition team going forward, and doing the final work in the kind of operational logistics to make sure that everything is going to be smooth for tenants and staff on the June 1st transition date. And then, of course, we'll have an opportunity to celebrate the following week with councillors, the mayor, tenants and our staff at several events the following week. So really looking forward to the work ahead. And again, a big thanks to the board, our staff, and all of our partners to where we got to today. I think I'll happy to answer any questions, and then I would hand it over to Tom Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Questions for Michael? Okay, so it's Tom's turn then.
Over to me. Thanks, Lawrence. So, yeah, real pleasure for me to be here at my inaugural meeting on day 3 with the board. I have had the opportunity over the last 2 days to have a lot of meetings with different people and different groups. You know, as I said to so many people, the onboarding experience for me at Toronto Seniors has been really positive. A lot of information, and you know, every minute it seems that there's something else that will be worked on by the CEO and team, but that's okay. That's all part of a new organization. And you know, just reiterate the comments of the work that the interim team, you know, has done, and the board, the city, I think has set Toronto Seniors up as best it can at this point in time for the work that we have to undertake. And you know, certainly for me, looking forward, the priorities is the agreements, right? Finalizing those, you know, to the best of our ability, ensuring a smooth transition, supporting our tenants and the staff. That will be an imperative focus. And I know there's a small team that's being put together, meeting each morning as of June to, you know, deal with these the kind of issues, operational issues as they arrive as part of the transition. So really doing our best to stay on top of that. Also, the tenant engagement part has started for me. Met with the stack, and yesterday, I guess that was a Monday. The tenant leaders yesterday, and so that work will continue with the listening tour that will be starting in June. You know, space that I will certainly enjoy getting to the buildings and meeting with the tenants, with some of the staff and you know, with the engagement plan through stack coming to the board at the end of June, a really point that we then continue to work on that engagement plan, have something fully in place by the end of the year. But I just think that the work in terms of, you know, talking, listening, and then working on that a plan with the tenants and with the board will really, you know, once again help to move work forward. Another key priority for me, and Michael spoke to this earlier in the meeting, was just the hiring of the senior team. And so, you know, I have been briefed by Michael, by Paul, around you know, what some of the previous discussions at the board about that leadership team. So with that information, and considering further, you know, understanding the roles more that would be required, getting to know the organization more, coming to the board, you know, in June with the recommendation for that leadership team. And you know, for me, considering, you know, the support of a consulting service to look at with those positions, what they will be, because there will be a lot of work, but you know, to put that team in place, get the right individuals in place. And so that will be a focus for me as well. And also, you know, what I have been hearing and knowing with the policies that have moved over from Toronto Community Housing, I think some very kind of work to get underway, working with staff, working with the tenants, would be to take those policies and begin, and from a priority perspective, and which ones, you know, we need to pay more attention to, more specificity around those policies for seniors to reflect their lives and our operations. So there's that. I just want to kind of summarize, you know, where I saw some of that key work over the next couple of months. And just once again, a real pleasure to be here with the board today. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions to Tom or Marks?
Just welcome, Tom, from the board, and it's wonderful as the lead for the tenant engagement committee. Just great to actually hear that you're putting tenants first, and it's noted that you've already actually met with STAC and that you've actually met with tenant leaders, and I think that's actually a really great place to start, because this whole board is actually really committed to making sure that the tenants are the focus of our work. So just wanted to welcome you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's clear by your summary, Tom, you get it.
Thank you.
Jim, you had something to say? Jim?
No, I just said I was just
Okay,
agreeing.
fine. Thank you. Yeah.
It's very good to have someone on board who is listening.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, if we don't have any more comments, let's move to the next item. That's item 17. That's the report of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting that was held on May 3rd. It's a verbal report and it will be me. The Audit, Finance and Risk Committee of the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation held its meeting on May 3rd. Mr. Rees, the interim finance lead, submitted the following policies and procedures for review: procurement policy and procedures, procurement method and delegation of authority matrix, expenses, claims policy and procedures, and the investment policy. The first two policies largely mirror the Toronto Community Housing Corporation policies, and they are in line with the broader public sector procurement policies. The investments policy, however, is designed specifically to suit the needs and circumstances of our corporations. These policies are being brought to the board for approval today. They are in your board package, and Norm will be presenting them after I complete my report. The committee also reviewed its work plan activities and scheduling of future committee meetings. In the closed session, Ms. Rees provided an update on the status of the finance, recruitment activities, and the transition plan, application for insurance, various insurance coverages, which we discussed in the closed meeting today, and then in fact we passed the resolution as well. Another item we discussed was plan to apply for a short-term demand line of credit from bank. That's the end of my report. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm open to questions. Having heard none, let's move to the next item. That's item 18, finance-related policies for approval, which I talked about earlier. Norman.
Thank you, Lawrence. I don't actually have a lot to add to what you've said. I mean, the procurement policy it does mirror the broader public sector policy. We, as an organization, will be very much relying on the procurement department within Toronto Community Housing. And so there are a number of policies and procedures that we will be following. The matrix that Lawrence referred to really highlights reflects the delegation of authority within the organization, depending upon the nature of the procurement, whether it's a sole source or a single source or a vendor of record, etc. And that, as you know, that delegation of authority policy mirrors the community housing policy. They are broad and high limits, but it was something that we opted not to change, primarily because of the system limitations at the time and the matrix of how approval policies are translated by position within the organization. With the expense reimbursement policy is similar. It is taken from community housing. The only big difference between this and the community housing policy is that we will not be having a P card or purchasing card, and the community housing had a very substantial portion of their procedure devoted to P cards. We will be using corporate credit cards, and we will be having 2 at least in the interim through RBC. It's a corporate credit card program that allows for the same fundamental exercise, but in a more streamlined manner. And then finally, the investment policy. Toronto Community Housing has a substantial investment policy because they have a substantial investment portfolio, largely investments to cover their upcoming principal payments on their mortgages. And so that they are generating substantial interest and other income in order to fill the gap on their obligation. We do not have that problem right now. And so we are looking more to, if we have surplus cash in year, you know, what could we possibly invest it in, that cash in the short term? And would those rates be any better than sort of the daily interest rate we get in our bank account? So talks about GICs and, you know, government, all government-backed securities. My experience in the last couple of years through the pandemic is actually that interest income on bank balances is better than the short-term rates you can get through GICs and government-backed securities. So that's the policy. It's much more streamlined, and it does. It's more indicative of where we will be for the next little while. So I'd be pleased to answer any specific questions. The committee looked at the policy and the procedures. We're asking for you to review and approve, if you wish, the policies themselves and not the procedures. And they're coming to you, by the way, because you have a role in those. You can use expense management policy to claim expenses, and you do have delegated authority within the procurement policy. Depending upon the dollar limit, Tom will be required to come back for approval of certain activities, which limit is substantially higher than it has been currently, by the way.
Any questions for Norm?
Lawrence, if I could make just one other brief comment. We, with respect to the, it may be asked, the letter of credit or the revolving demand loan line, it will take some time to get approval through the city. And so the city, we are working with the city to have some of our second quarter or third and fourth quarter funds come a little earlier while we work through the demand credit facility. So we won't need that credit facility for a while. We'll have to work through the city to their processes to get us to that point.
Thank you, Norm. And shall we have the motion for approval of those policies?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Warren and seconded by Jim. All in favor? So it's carried. Let's move to the next item. That's item 19. That's the corporation's financial planning, financial results through April 30, 2022. Norm.
Thank you, Lawrence. The briefing note is fairly self-explanatory. A couple of key points that I'd like to make is that the second tranche of our funding to the end of May was received in the month of April. So we have cash to support our business, which is great news. And then I did make a notation, and it keeps moving back and forth with respect to HST. And so it was mentioned earlier in our discussion of the transition agreement that remains outstanding. So the process will remain outstanding, but until such time as Toronto Seniors Housing becomes a determined municipality, and that might take some time depending upon how quick CRA responds, there will be HST charged on the transactions between the two corporations. So we will charge HST on rent less operating expenses, and community housing will charge us HST on the service agreement, and we will file as a regular claimant and be a net payer of HST for a period of time until we get our designation. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that briefing note.
I just
Councillor,
asked Norm,
yeah.
will we get reimbursed that HST once we get the designation? I think so.
Well, there's different steps along the way. We have made application for to be a determined organization back to inception, which from an HST perspective is September 21st, 2021. So between September and the end of May, we'll see. And that's why we're expensing it. But from June on, we are a net payer. So we will have received more HST than we pay. So we will net pay. And so there will be no net HST implication during the period of time that we are under this relationship between community housing and ourselves, where effectively our revenue is rent less operating expenses. That's our revenue, so we have to bill for that.
Any other questions for now? Let's move to the next item, item 20. That's the report of the Corporate Governance and Human Resources Committee. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the report before you, it lists a number of different policies that we dealt with at our last board committee meeting, including occupational health and safety policies, compensation policies, legal policies, and strategic communication policies. We had a very busy meeting. We thoroughly discussed all of them and got some perspective back from staff on them, and I'm happy to put these forward, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions and comments on those policies? If you don't have any questions, let's have a motion for approval.
I'm more than happy to move them as a package.
Okay.
I'll second, Brenda.
Seconded by Brenda. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you. Oh, and sorry, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to thank staff for all of their hard work and support as we put these policies together. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Let's move to the next item. That's item number 21, additional policies for approval. Mary.
Yes, this policy relates to use of information technology. And as you know, we will be using TSHC's information technology environment and applications. And as a result, our employees need to be subject to the same use of technology policies as TSHC's employees. In this case, we haven't actually adapted TSHC's policy. We have adopted their policy because we are using their information technology platform. And it will apply to all of our staff. And it covers that they have to use TSHC equipment. There's some very limited personal use, and there's a number of things that staff are not allowed to use corporate technology for. So I would recommend that we adopt that policy.
Any questions, comments? Having heard none, I think we need a motion to approve it. I need an approver, a mover, and then a seconder.
So moved.
Moved by Warren. I need a seconder.
Paul, I'll second.
Yeah, seconded by Councillor Ainsley. All in favor? Carried. Let's move to item 22. That's MFIPPA, delegation of authority. Michael.
Thank you, Lawrence. So this relates to the obligations of the corporation under the Municipal Freedom of Information Act. And under that act, the board is responsible for meeting the obligations under the act. But you are enabled to delegate that authority to staff. And often in a corporation, this would end up being delegated to either legal counsel or a chief privacy officer within the corporation. So we, in lieu of the leadership team being put in place and having that long-term discussion, we are recommending that the board delegate this authority for now to Tom as a CEO. And he will then, on your behalf, fulfill the obligations of the Act in dealing with any freedom of information requests and the requirements in the Act for those requests coming into the corporation. Happy to answer any questions, and I think there's a motion for that delegation.
Can we have the motion for approval? It's moved by Brenda.
Seconded. Carrie.
Seconded by Carrie. All in favor? Carried. Okay, let's move to item number 23. That's the communication engagement report by Arlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report was provided just to offer an overview of activities in this area, as well as an update on launch. Just wondered if any members had any questions they wanted to bring forward from reviewing the report that I can answer. We've had most of our RSVPs relative to launch are in for June 7th. I might have to do a little reminder for everyone for the other dates that are on our plan. We've had good response from all of the councillors that have been invited, and the mayor's office has been terrifically supportive. Our production of collateral is amazingly on track and arriving ahead of schedule. So I'm delighted. And Brenda does not need to ask me again. If Brenda's still on the call, she does not need to ask me again. There are t-shirts for the board.
That was a big request from Stack as well. I just wanted to comment. Arlene's been I think really engaging very nicely with the tenants who are, I think, very excited about from what we're hearing at the meetings about the launch, and asking for t-shirts as well. But I think actually just, for me, that's a level of engagement that we're seeing. I think actually the theme is also really resonating nicely around the tree, and it's really neat timing that we now actually have an official tree in the city. So you were ahead of yourself, actually, Arlene and company, in terms of coming up with something that seems to be actually going over well. So I just wanted to say that I think it's exciting.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda. We did have some good responses at our staff meeting this week, and some good suggestions. So we're trying to take those and move forward with them.
Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, just making sure that on our invite list that we're having the 41679 and the what's the CSU under OPSU represented there. I think it's very important that we do.
All the Labour parties?
Yes, that they're the official. Are they already invited, Arlene?
I believe they have been. That's good. We go through the our people and culture folks, but we have they are on our list. Yes.
Yes, that would be whoever the heads are there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good start. Thank you.
So let's move to the next item, Arlene. The first 100 days priorities.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. The board may recall that in January and February, we did some work reaching out to tenants to ask what were their priorities for the corporation moving forward. We got some feedback on that. We through the survey and through conversations with the tenants, we came up with the priorities that that they were interested in based on the work that was done previously with Toronto Community Housing around tenant priorities. And so post that work, we had to figure out how were we going to actually report back to tenants on progress relative to the priorities that they have indicated are important to them as the corporation shores itself up in the weeks, months, and years ahead. And so what is before the board is an indicator report that was developed with staff to say these are the areas that the tenants identified as priorities, and this is how we are going to report on them. We've been very clear with tenants, and I think we've been clear here as well, that while these priorities will be an area of focus for the corporation, it's important to note that they represent several long-standing issues for resolution. And so we want to focus on them, and there will be work done on them starting at the beginning of the corporation, but it may take longer than 100 days to move the needle significantly on these. But what we would like to do is to be able to report to tenants on how we are actually moving that needle. So that's what that framework represents, is some clarity on what tenants said they wanted, what we are able to report based on the systems and processes that are already in place that we will be inheriting coming from TSHC. And over time, those may change, but in the short term, those are the indicators that we are ready and able to report on in the coming weeks and months ahead. So it's for the board's approval as a framework through which we would be providing the report back to the board at every meeting, and then the framework through which we would use to report back to tenants. And we've endeavored to make the language very, very clear. So we're looking for any thoughts or feedback on that before we move for an approval, please.
Just for context, if I may, Lawrence, this report would normally go through the Quality and Tenant Engagement Committee of the board as the other kind of corporate performance reporting would go. We can bring it in May, and that's why it's coming direct to the board. But in normal sequence, it would go through that committee first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Brenda.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, fine. Thank you. I like this chart. What I'm interested in is the process here. I don't like deceiving people, and I don't like to lead them on, in a sense. So what is our communication with the tenants in terms of accountability? I mean, they are suggesting things. Many of them have dollar implications. So do we say we're committed to following through on what they want, or how do we explain and engage in a process that's respectful of tenant input without leading them on and thinking that we can do everything at once? I mean, I don't think everyone assumes that. I mean, people aren't stupid, but I'm just concerned that in our communication that we don't lead people on or don't give a sense of their empowerment and control if there is none. I mean, some of these things are really great ideas, and I support them, but maybe we can't promise some of these things, or we can't even deliver on some of these things for a while.
So that's
how do the tenants understand this process?
So that's a terrific question, Brenda, and particularly, let me raise the issue particularly around the staffing over the evenings and weekend.
Yes, yes.
That's a financial, a significant financial implication for the organization. So we need to come back to the board with what does that look like, back to QT and then to the board, as to what does that cost implication look like. So that's how we're framing that particular one, because we know there's a significant financial impact, and we will, as part of our reporting, we're going to have to, explain a bit of that to the tenants, that while it is a desired state, there are some significant costs associated with it, we're going to have to go to the board to get that approval for that expense before any implementation can take place in this particular area. Whereas there are other areas around training, for example, have already been committed. It's committed work that has to get done, so we can move forward on those. So I think our goal is to be as transparent as possible with tenants around what we can and cannot do. And essentially what this indicator report is doing is counting things that are already in play. And then we will, where there are items that are coming forward that actually need a deeper dive and more information, we'll have to bring those forward to the board and have discussions about whether it's things that we are actually able to deal with or not. Does that help, Brenda?
Sort of. It's just, I mean, for example, under community development, you're talking here about social gatherings, group activities. That's use of space. And as we've already seen in our discussion with the integrated service model and the hub discussion, use of space is an important issue and not yet a resolved issue, right? So one thing may be in contradiction to something else.
So,
You know? So I just want to make sure that the tenants know that the final control does rest with us. You know, truth be told. And I don't want to leave them with any sense that we're not listening to them if we don't deliver on some of these things.
So I think what you're asking is,
you know, sorry.
I'm so sorry, you cut out. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
I think what you're asking is that our communications is clear and it doesn't imply things that we're not able to deliver. So that's on us to make sure that we do that well. I think there's also there's multiple streams to this. So the example of use of space can be, you know, we might have to address through policy work. And so through some of the policy work that we have to do, which came when we were looking at the policies for tenant-facing policies at QTE last month, we heard very clearly from two deputants that we need to look at tenant-facing policies from a seniors lens. Yeah. So looking at that particular one, maybe it would be one of our, I would imagine, be one of our priorities moving forward, right? That this is one of the things that really matters. So in order to address perhaps that, you know, having the activities and use of common space, they would have to happen concurrently in some respects, and those conversations can't be in isolation to each other, or at least the people who are part of those conversations have to keep a longitudinal view on the issue and not just look at it in its vertical.
Do the tenant engagement committee people have any comments on this, or? I know it didn't go to your committee yet, so.
No, it's, you know, we've committed to including the tenants directly, the tenant leaders, in identifying the most important policies. And I would say use of space is right at the very top. At the same time, we have to ensure that the staff who are involved in these decisions are on side, because there have been a lot of missteps. Unequal application of the guidelines, and there's some real trust issues around this where tenants and staff are concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And I think eventually we also need to actually clarify our decision-making process. So this is actually what I like about what is presented before us is actually, we're actually identifying areas that are very important to tenants, as have been described already from tenants. And I think it's really important that we actually allow the tenants to actually be very involved in terms of the recommendations around use of space, for instance. And that then when it comes down to decision making, I think we have to be very transparent around that. But I think this is actually not answering all of that. This is intended to actually give us a framework for moving forward at this point of the organization. And I look forward to Tom being involved with this and others, because I think this is the key. These are key issues that are going to be the beginning of our relationship as a new corporation and a board. In terms of, you know, I don't think that we're looking at making decisions that are out of line with where they're clearly tenant interest.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you've said, Linda, and the importance of that decision to have you and Carrie attend the stack. and to maintain the stack, which was a city council decision in the face of going to collapse the stack, and to refresh the stack, and that the stack will be such a helpful guide in this corporation in making sure that we're aligned with tenant interests. And I think some of those issues around trust and around what you can and can't do, how much money there is, those conversations can be had in a very mature way. I think it will be very helpful.
Yeah.
It's a great model that we've set up here and should be really replicated in many different places. So I'm very confident that if we keep on this track with the stack, that we won't have a lot of the problems that I think, Brenda, you're considering we might have, because you're right. There could be some questions about what people want, but having that conversation, I think, will be very helpful. Got it all set up well.
No, I think it's a good outline. It's just I've had experiences where often consultation processes have gone wrong. You know, I just want to make sure we have, and we're developing it as we go along, really. But we as an organization have a clear sense of what we mean by engaging with tenants and tenant-directed, tenant-led, what those things mean other than just phrases. And I'm just very conscious of people's time and contribution and don't want to be misusing that, you know, or leaving them with any feeling that they're not being listened to.
I think what
process more so than content.
If I may comment, Brenda, in the conversations we've had with Stack and others about, you know, this process, we engaged with them in January and February to even come up with these priorities. They felt it was that they appreciated being asked, and then they appreciated that we were not just going to sort of accept the priorities and then go off and do something else without reporting on them. So I think that this other piece of reporting transparently around what it is that we are committing to and giving them updates is very important to them as we move forward as a corporation, to build that trust and to build that transparency and that well of goodwill with tenants moving forward.
And I like the specificity, like there's lots of detail here. I like that.
Yeah.
So you can measure it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jim?
I'd just like to say that was the main reason I applied to on the board.
Hard to hear you, Jim.
That was the main reason I applied to be on the board in the first place. I was originally a member of STAT, but when I saw that it was more of rolling out a top-down kind of approach to everything, I said, this isn't for me. And then one of the city clerks sent me the information that maybe this is more of what you're looking for, is a chance to have voices heard. And so I applied for the board, and I'm really glad to hear that we're moving in that direction, and that Tom coming on board and has reaffirmed that by making on his second day going out to listen to tenants. I mean, that to me shows that we're on the right track.
Yeah. And I think it speaks volumes of just how far we've come with our appreciation of Stack. You know, going back to the city council's motion and you know what has developed since then, Stack needs to be not just recognized but appreciated at all levels for the contributions that they've made. Yeah, it wasn't there when you were on, Jim.
Becoming what I envisioned it was in
Yeah.
the first place. Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly come a long way from those days, and we need to keep that that spirit alive. That they are a very valued advisory group.
Sorry, everybody, I have to go. Nice to see you. Welcome,
miss you.
Tom. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If we don't have any further questions, can we have a resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Brenda and seconded by Jim. All in favor? Great. The next item, item number 24. That's a project status and risk report by Mary.
Yes, we sent the project status report out yesterday, I believe. And things have been moving so quickly that this is the most recent status. But you will see that the only items that are in, there are no red items. The only items in yellow relate to the agreements that you have already discussed. And as you know, we think that we will have solutions to all of the outstanding issues in the agreement in time that these agreements are signed. Other than that, everything is in green, which means that all of the activities that we had identified to be completed to support the transition on June 1st are on target. Doesn't mean they're completed yet because it's 10 more days, but everything is on target and the team members are confident that they will have everything on the checklist in hand for June 1st. So this is a very positive report this far in advance of the actual transition. And that may seem like it's not that far in advance, but we are in very good shape for the transition.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions for Mary? Okay, we almost come to the end of the board meeting. Any other business matters any of you would like to? Few more minutes left. Having heard none, it's time for us to adjourn. I need a motion. Who would move this motion?
I'll move it.
Moved by Jim and seconded by Carrie. All in favor? Carried. So thank you all for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Take care.
See you, we'll see you, I guess, in our open houses.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Lawrence, you look great in your photos.
Yes, I sent him an email telling him that. They're wonderful.
Both you two guys did as well, so.
Oh, gosh. He was just elegant and worldly looking.
Yes, exactly.
I think he's gone, so he didn't hear us.